What's written in this note that these parents hid from their adoptive daughter for 20 years will shock you. Parents will do anything within their power to protect their children from the evil forces of the world. From the moment they met her, the couple loved their adoptive daughter like she was their very own. And like most good parents, they were willing to go to extreme lengths to shield her from anything that might hurt her. So they made the decision to hide something from her, something that could have changed her life had they shown her earlier on, knowing that someday she would be ready to hear what it said. Ruth and Ken Poehler from Hudsonville, Michigan, were ready to begin the adoption process. The couple started talking to adoption agencies in their area to see what they could do. One day, the Poehlers got a phone call that would change their lives forever. A newborn baby had been abandoned in a market in China and was in need of a good home. They sprang into action and jumped on a plane, eager to meet the baby they hoped would soon be their own. Truth be told, the couple wasn't going to let a poor baby suffer the consequences of bad decisions made by their parents. They wanted to take the initiative and cater to the baby's needs, if no one was willing to do so. Jingji wasn't even a week old yet when she was left at the market in Suzhou. She had been wrapped in several blankets and left in a basket on a bench. When one of the vegetable vendors arrived and found her, he called the authorities. Jingji was taken to the local children's welfare office, which has connections to several adoption agencies. Making sure that they contacted the right people was first on the list. It was because the situation deemed necessary for it. One of those agencies just happened to be the one that the Poehlers use in Hudsonville. Little did they know that day that their dreams of becoming parents to this little girl were about to become their reality. The Poehlers were no strangers to raising children, so they were fully prepared to take on the responsibilities that go along with adopting an infant. They had already successfully raised 2 children of their own, and they were ready to add a new member to the family. The couple personally knew someone who had adopted a child from China. Ruth and Ken returned from China with the child in their arms. Not long after they arrived, they renamed their new daughter, Caddy. When she was old enough to hear its content, they would show her. Since Caddy was so young when she arrived in the United States, she didn't have much to compare her experience to. After all, she was just a baby when she left China, so she couldn't remember anything about her experiences there. What she did know was her new home in the US, and she seemed to absolutely love it. The Poehlers couldn't have been happier with their decision to adopt Caddy. She was such a sweet and fun-loving little girl, and they loved every moment they spent with her. Caddy recalls having a good childhood. When Caddy turned 18, they knew that her life was going to change forever. They had decided to wait to show her the note that she was found with as a baby until she was an adult. And that day had arrived. They had to tell her the truth. Of course, she knew for her whole life that she was adopted, so it isn't like they were going to shock her with that. It was more about what her true parents had to say, rather than the fact that she was adopted. The information that was contained within that note would absolutely shock her, though. Was she ready for this? During the early 1900 AD, China enacted the one-child policy as a part of a birth planning program designed to control the rapidly growing Chinese population. Before the policy, each couple was allowed to have 2 children, which would have meant an entirely different fate for Caddy, whose biological parents found themselves in a horrible position. The couple already had 1 child when they found out they were pregnant with Caddy, which forced them to make an incredibly tough decision. When Seo Luda and Qian Fengxiang discovered that they were pregnant with their second child, they found themselves in between a rock and a hard place, the hardest of places. But now that Jingji had been born, a whole new array of difficulties presented themselves. The couple knew that hiding a newborn baby would be near, if not entirely impossible. However, admitting to giving birth to the second child wouldn't just mean turning the baby over to the authorities. It would mean paying some hefty fines that they just couldn't afford. When Jingji was just 5 days old, they wrapped her up in her little blankets and took her to the most populated market they could think of in their area. They pinned the note to her blankets and left their baby girl at the market. The words on the note revealed the exact date and time of the child's birth, along with the name they'd given her, and how terrible they felt about not being able to keep her. They jotted down that if fate should have it, for whoever found their daughter, and the note to meet them again in 1020 years at the Broken Bridge. The bridge was located in Hangzhou on the day of the Qixi Festival. which is basically the Chinese version of Valentine's Day. They may not have expected anything to actually come from it, but they clung to that hope and prayed that fate would take their side in the future. And someday, they truly would be reunited with that little girl they lost. When that 10-year mark rolled around, Xu and Qian prepared themselves to make good on their promise. They traveled to the broken bridge on the morning of the Kixi festival. If someone was there, it would mean their daughter was okay and that she'd forgiven them for what they had to do. But after waiting around by the bridge all day, it became apparent that no one was coming. Even though nothing had happened the moment they'd expected, however, not all hope was lost. Something miraculous was still in the cards for the couple. While Xu and Qian walked away from the broken bridge in Hangzhou with broken hearts, someone from the United States was just moments away, toting the note that they'd written all those years ago. Ruth and Ken had sent their friend who lives in China, Annie, to go meet the couple, eager to find out if they followed through on their words. Unfortunately, Annie arrived just a little too late. The couple had given up hope and left to travel home just a few moments before she got into the festival. But they weren't ready to call it quits just yet. Xu and Qian just felt in their hearts that they would see their baby girl again someday. When Ketty was finally an adult, Ken and Ruth told her all about her life back in China. Then they told her that Xu and Qian wanted to meet her. But there was a problem. No one knew how to get a hold of them. Yet, as luck would turn out, two one-year-old Ketty happened to meet a filmmaker who was making a documentary about babies being adopted in the US from China. She and the filmmaker made a deal. He would help her find her biological parents, and she would appear in his documentary. After 1 years of wondering who her biological parents were, it was finally time for Ketty to meet them. The filmmaker, Chang Chengfu, had tracked them down. And of course, Xu and Qian were more than willing to meet their daughter and participate in the film. It was 2017, and the Kixi Festival was taking place in Hangzhou. Everything happened just the way the couple had hoped when they wrote the note more than 2 decades before. Katie waited at one end of the bridge with the television crew, while Qian and Xu eagerly paced around at the other. Finally, once the cameras were rolling and everyone was ready, they made their way toward each other, excited but cautious. It was as if this moment was in the making for such a long time. After all, this was a huge moment, especially for a very emotional Qian, who'd been worried about the baby she was forced to give up. Qian may have been forced to give her daughter up due to policy, but she did give her up. So it may seem irrational that she seemed to have so many problems with Katty's life and family, and the US for one. She got irritated when she found out she worked as a waitress during college. The family stayed together for the 2 days Katie was in town at their apartment. Things were a bit confusing for everyone since Katty doesn't speak Mandarin and her family didn't speak English. Qian was even more emotional after she was able to spend some time with her daughter. But Katie had a life of her own back in the United States now, one that she was getting ready to head back to soon. When the time came for Katty to get on the plane to go home, she had mixed feelings. It was as if she was not prepared with how to react and what to react by simply saying. She was excited to get back to Ken and Ruth, but she knew there were so many questions she still had for her Chinese family. She's visited multiple countries and experienced different cultures, including the one that would have been her own, had Qian and Xu not been forced to give her up. Although, had that not happened, she may not have turned into the multi-talented young woman that she is today. Thanks to Ken and Ruth Poehler, Katie has led a life that has been rich with experiences. Qian may not be happy that Katie knows how to wash her own dishes, but she's got to be impressed with everything she's accomplished. It was more of a dream come true, rather than what others would have expected her adventures to be. There comes a time in every young person's life when things around them start to change, where everyone starts to evolve and become their own people, which often includes branching off into new relationships and starting families. But of course, she was happy to add it to the list of things she's done. Katie actually trains for and runs marathons. In fact, she recently completed this 5th third-sponsored 2-5 Quran. Take a look at that one more time. 2-5 Quran. Meeting your biological parents as an adult after being abandoned as a child does not sound like a task easily accomplished by the faint of heart. Plus, she spent a weekend with these people that she had just met for the first time. consciously, anyway, without understanding a word they were saying and vice versa. But the entire experience only strengthened her more and gave her back a piece of herself she probably felt she lost. Even though you won't find your stereotypical come-hither selfies on Caddy's social media, that doesn't mean she doesn't take any. Technically speaking, a selfie simply means a photo that one takes of oneself. Now she has two sets of loving parents on opposite ends of the world. Although no one is certain what the future holds, both Katie and her Chinese family are interested in another reunion in the future. Maybe between now and then, she will learn a few key phrases in Mandarin so that she can better communicate with them next time.